Hi y'all, welcome back, or if this is your first time joining me, welcome. My name is Dr. Chelsea and this is the Undaunted PhD channel. So today we'll be talking about the different career options for PhD holders outside of academia. Specifically, we'll be focusing on the PhD to policy pipeline. And so there are a lot of different ways that an individual can influence policy. But for today's episode, I'm specifically be talking about opportunities or avenues for PhD holders in three different approaches. The first is academic institutions, the second is intermediary organizations, and the third being the United States government. So the policymaking process is really complex, and there are a lot of different entities and organizations and even individuals operating off of each other to influence policy. As we've seen a lot more in recent years, the media has a huge influence on policy, think tanks, lobbyists, and even activists and everyday citizens. But today we'll be focusing on what's most relevant for PhD holders. And so just to preface, I am a social psychologist and my perspective will really be from that social scientist perspective. But I do think that this information is applicable to a lot of people outside of social psychologists, and hopefully that the information I'm providing is broad enough that everyone could benefit. What we're going to do with this channel is really begin to think outside of the box and think about what innovative ways can we use our skills and our resources that we already have in order to pick the career that the best suited for us. So the first area that I want to focus on is research and policy centers on university campuses. So these centers can be a source of interdisciplinary policy relevant research collaborations, meaningful policy activities, and training for policy focused researchers and policy practitioners. So the Center for Policing Equity was co-founded by social psychologist Philip Goff, and it aims to bridge the divide of communication, generational mistrust, and suffering between communities and law enforcement. The Center for Developing Child focuses on children facing adversity. The Center for Law and Social Policy focuses on advancing policy solutions for low-income people. The Institute for Research on Poverty focuses on identifying the causes and consequences of poverty and inequality in the United States. The Rudd Center for Food Policy and Obesity focuses on childhood obesity, poor diet, and weight bias. And Social Psychological Answers to Real World Questions is described as a do tank whose mission is to create and share social psychological insights with people working to improve society. So the next avenue that we'll focus on is intermediary organizations. These organizations include advocacy groups, professional membership organizations, think tanks, the national academies, research, evaluation, and consulting organizations, grassroots community organizing, and foundations. So first, looking at professional membership organizations, I'll focus on two, but there are a lot of organizations that are geared towards specific academic backgrounds. So the first organization I'll be focusing on is the American Psychological Association. This organization, APA, has a public interest government relations office. And in this office, employees are able to attend congressional briefings and give testimony. They're able to educate psychologists on local and national advocacy. They're able to educate politicians on the contributions of psychology to public policy issues. And similarly, we have the American Sociological Association, ASA. Within this organization, there are a few different options for PhD holders. First being Director of Diversity and Inclusion, the Director of Research, Senior Research Associate, or even a Program Officer role. Next, we'll focus on think tanks, research, evaluation, and consulting organizations. So different types of intermediary organizations differ greatly in their mission, size, policy, influence, and activities. Though different, PhD holders within this domain use their relationship building skills, communication, research, strategic skills, along with content expertise to bridge the world of research, practice, and policy. And when I was still in graduate school and I was thinking about what I wanted to do once I graduated. I began to compile a list every time I came across an interesting article that was non-academic or came across a talk or a briefing. I just jotted down the name of the organization so that when I graduated, I had this running list of places that I wanted to apply to, which is exactly what I did. So now I want to discuss the benefits and limitations in working in intermediary organizations. So one huge benefit is that you can start in this career before you even get your degree. And for me, one huge disadvantage of being a graduate student on a non-academic path was that my colleagues or my peers were already in their career. They were already networking with the individuals that they'll be collaborating with in the future, their colleagues in the future. But I was at a disadvantage because I was sort of separated from the people who I will come to know in the future. And that's why having internships or fellowships so you can begin building those connections within your intended field is really critical. So another benefit is that you're able to generate reports and briefings for national audiences, whereas academics are often behind a paywall, meaning that they are only really writing for other academics, but intermediary organizations reach a larger audience. Another benefit is that compared to academic faculty, intermediary organizations have greater policy influence. Another limitation is that a lot of these organizations are nonprofits, and because of that, they're dependent on philanthropic funds. The money dries up and they might not be as stable. So the last avenue I'll focus on is working as a policy insider. Policy insiders have the most direct access to policy makers, and so if you're someone who's really interested in impacting policy, that might be the most attractive route for you. And so policy insiders can be situated at all levels of government, including federal, so working as a congressional staffer, state, being an appointed official, or local, being elected to something like the city council. So there's an awesome organization called Run for Something where everyday people can run for office. I'm going to talk about the benefits and the limitations of working as a policy insider. The biggest benefits is influencing policy. Having the direct ear of a senator or a House representative. The only thing closer is actually running for Congress. So one of the limitations is that your areas of expertise isn't really considered important once you get to policy. No one cares about my dissertation. No one really cares about my research. They know that I'm an expert in diversity and inclusion, and that's really the extent. And so that might be something to consider when you're really thinking or stressing hard about what do I do my dissertation on, what do I do my research on. It doesn't necessarily matter as much because you have to be an inch deep and a mile wide on a lot of issues, and you sort of become a student all over again. And of course, another limitation is just the pay. Even though the more senior positions, if you're coming in that PhD, you'll make pretty good money, but government salaries are capped. The thing is, you can go online and see how much folks make, but you're kind of limited to a certain amount. But next time, I'll be talking about how can you begin preparing for these careers as a graduate student so that you'll be able to build your brand and become more marketable once you graduate. That's all I have for you all today. Thank you for sitting through this and joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.